Evil is not loud, nor is it obvious. It does not come crashing through your door, brandishing flames or chains. No, it prefers a quieter route. It walks on slippered feet, speaking gently, often disguised as art, culture, or even nostalgia. The things we allow into our homes, those that sit silently on shelves, hang on our walls, or lie hidden in drawers, can be more than just matter. They are not always new. Some of them, though we may not realize it, are invitations. Invitations to something ancient, cold, and malevolent. It is not the shape of the object, nor its price, but the spirit behind it that matters. And spirits, unseen but not unfelt, are drawn to symbols of their kind, just as moths are drawn to flame. What you own may not simply be yours, it may be a door. Consider the quiet comfort of familiarity. We defend things simply because they are known to us. It was my grandmother's, we say, or it reminds me of a place I loved. But demons are not sentimental. They do not care for your reasons. They care only for rights. What gives them legal claim? A talisman picked up in a foreign market, a board used for innocent communication with spirits, a book laced with innocent communications disguised as poetry. These are not it, they are legal ground. You may have no belief in the world they come from, but belief does not govern their access. Agreement does. Possession, even passive, is a kind of agreement. Now imagine a home as a sanctuary, a true one, a place where peace does not merely exist but thrives, a place where the mind is clear, the atmosphere warm, and the nights free of disturbance. This cannot coexist with darkness, no matter how hidden. You cannot cultivate a garden while letting a few weeds remain for their shape or their story. Weeds do not respect boundaries, nor does evil. It will take what it is given, and then it will take more. Every item brought in under the guise of curiosity or aesthetic can become a channel, not because the material is cursed, but because it aligns with something that is. The spiritual realm, like the physical, responds to design and purpose. We do not need to be afraid of every object. That is not the point. Fear is not the aim. Discernment is. There is wisdom in recognizing what was never meant to dwell among the holy. And by holy, I do not mean perfect, but set apart. If your home is to be a place of light, of clarity, and of sanctuary, then it cannot afford even quiet alliances with darkness. There are things you must remove, not because they are superstitious trinkets, but because they have become spiritual. Not all evil announces itself. Some of it waits patiently, knowing that indifference is its best ally. To cleanse a home is not merely to rearrange it. It is to declare, this place is not yours. It is to take authority not through volume but through choice. A thrown-away charm, a burned object, a deleted file. These acts are small on the surface, but enormous in the unseen realm. They are expulsions, refusals, declarations. Not every item will carry a spirit, but the ones that do often hide in plain sight, shielded by our ignorance or affection. And in the end, it is not enough to wish for peace. One must choose it. And that choice, more often than not, begins with removing what does not belong. Evil, contrary to our usual imagination, does not need chaos to thrive. It needs invitation. Not grand gestures, but quiet, consistent allowances. The things we allow into our homes can carry more than aesthetic or sentimental value. They can carry agreements. An idol is not merely a statue, and a charm is not merely jewelry. These objects often come from roots planted in spiritual soil that is not benign. We live in a world that has forgotten the weight of meaning, so we laugh at the idea that a simple item could attract a presence. but meaning is precisely what gives these things power, not in themselves, but in the systems they represent. We forget that symbols are never neutral. They always point to something. Whether it's a figurine connected to ancient worship, a book steeped in rituals disguised as fiction, or artwork inspired by ideologies hostile to the good, true, and beautiful, these are not mere decor. They are doorways. Some people may argue that their belief should shield them, that spiritual forces cannot touch what they do not acknowledge. But spiritual realities do not function according to the laws of personal preference. Just as fire burns, whether you believe in it or not, so too do spiritual laws operate beyond our conscious consent. You may not know what an object once represented, how it was used, or why it was made, but the ignorance of the bearer does not dissolve the significance of the thing. When an object has been designed, invoked, or constructed for a spiritual purpose, it carries with it a resonance that attracts forces aligned with that purpose. These forces are not theatrical. They prefer subtleties, unrest during sleep, recurring fear, a haze of confusion, emotional oppression. They do not announce themselves because subtle influence is far more effective than open warfare. If they can dwell unnoticed, they win. But not all is shadow. There is another principle at work, the principle of dominion. Your home, your space, is not neutral ground. You were made to govern it, spiritually as well as physically, and that means you have the right and the responsibility to remove anything that does not serve the peace and purpose of the space. The problem is that many of us do not see our homes as sacred. We view them as functional, or worse, ornamental. But what if the home is meant to be more than that? What if it is meant to be a spiritual haven, a place where the soul can rest, where clarity can return, and where good can grow? If that is the case, then every item within its walls should either contribute to, or at least not compromise that goal. This is where the battle becomes subtle. Not everything evil looks grotesque. In fact, most of it is aesthetically pleasing. Evil rarely appears as monstrous. It prefers beauty that seduces and confuses. It hides behind charm, nostalgia, and novelty. It whispers, "This is just art," or "This is just a story." But if you look closely, you'll see the pattern, the glorification of darkness, the celebration of rebellion against order, the casual trivialization of what is sacred. And when these themes live with you day in and day out, on your shelves, in your media, on your walls, they do not merely remain external. They shape you, slowly, subtly, invisibly, until the atmosphere of your home begins to shift, and what once was peaceful becomes restless. To reclaim your home, you do not need superstition. You need discernment. Look around with fresh eyes. Ask not just "What is this?" but "What does this represent?" And if the answer is something rooted in darkness, no matter how small, then the solution is clear. Remove it. Let the light in. Make space for peace, because evil cannot dwell where it is not welcomed, and removing what welcomes it is one of the most powerful things you can do. There is a quiet war waged in every home, not with clashing swords or roaring flames, but through subtle agreements and passive invitations. Most people do not realize that the spiritual realm pays close attention to what we allow into our private spaces. The home, though physical in its walls and furniture, is also deeply spiritual in atmosphere. It becomes what we permit it to be. And permission is not always given through words. Often it's given through objects. Not every item you own is simply decorative. Some things carry histories. Others carry purposes. Still others carry spiritual intent. Whether brought in through ignorance or curiosity, there are certain items that serve as open doors, silent agreements with forces you did not invite aloud, but welcomed nonetheless. These objects do not have power in themselves, but they are aligned with systems of power that respond to symbols and familiarity. A home is not merely a place to eat and sleep. It is a sanctuary or a battlefield, depending on what you let dwell within it. Many of these objects look harmless. Books with strange themes, symbols engraved into artwork, souvenirs from lands steeped in ritual, even games and trinkets that pretend to be innocent but are steeped in the language of summoning and spirit manipulation. The world markets these things as harmless fun or aesthetic culture, but meaning is not erased by commercialization. The origin of a thing still holds weight. A statue of a deity once worshipped through sacrifice does not stop representing what it once was simply because it's now called art. A charm once designed to call on the dead does not become benign because it is sold in a gift shop. Objects, like words, carry intention, and intention builds bridges. We must be honest, not everything belongs in a home dedicated to peace. The spiritual world recognizes its own, and when we bring in things aligned with darkness, they serve as beacons. Even if you do not know it, something does, and it will respond. There is a cost to these silent agreements. It's often not dramatic. There may be no flashing lights, no overt possession. Instead, there is a slow erosion, sleepless nights, an unexplainable heaviness in certain rooms, a pattern of conflict or fear. You clean the house, but something still feels unclean. You pray, but peace doesn't linger. And all the while, a small figure on a shelf or a strange old book remains untouched, protected by sentiment or ignorance or doubt. But when you finally remove it, when you burn it or throw it out or break it, something changes. It is not the action itself that holds power, but the decision behind it. It is a moment of reclaiming dominion, and it is often then that peace returns, as if something that did not belong has finally been told to leave. It is a mistake to assume that because we live in the modern world, we are exempt from spiritual realities. Technology may advance, culture may shift, but the nature of spiritual darkness remains unchanged. It still seeks entry, it still thrives on deception, and it still needs consent. But here is the hope. It is also still subject to authority. You have the authority to declare what may and may not dwell in your spirit. The power of removal is not in superstition, it is in spiritual clarity. When you recognize that your home is meant to be a haven, a dwelling of light and rest, then anything that threatens that atmosphere, no matter how small, must be treated seriously, not with panic, but with resolve. Peace is not merely the absence of conflict, it is the fruit of careful cultivation, and it begins with the courage to remove what never should have been welcomed in the first place. There is a quiet danger in the things we keep close. Not the obvious weapons or blatant symbols of malice, but the subtle, the familiar, the sentimental. Objects have meaning beyond their materials, and the spiritual world pays attention to meaning. When we allow certain things into our homes, we are not simply decorating or collecting, we are opening our space to whatever those things are connected to. The world we cannot see is just as real as the one we can, and it is deeply responsive to what we welcome, protect, and admire. Darkness does not always arrive with violence. It comes clothed in beauty, nostalgia, or curiosity. It does not knock, it waits to be invited in, and once it is, it rarely leaves without resistance. Many believe that because they are not intentionally engaging in darkness, they are safe from its effects. But intention is not the only measure. Agreement often happens without full understanding. When we bring objects into our homes that were created with spiritual purpose, especially purposes rooted in the occult, idolatry, or rebellion, We align ourselves with those purposes, whether we acknowledge them or not. A dream catcher, admired for its design, may be more than an ornament if it originates from practices invoking ancestral spirits. A deck of tarot cards kept just for fun still carries the purpose it was created for. These items may seem powerless, but they serve as symbols, and symbols in the spiritual realm are invitations. You may not know the door has been opened, but something else does. The effect is rarely immediate. Evil prefers to work slowly. It thrives in confusion and delay. You may notice it first in the atmosphere, tension that won't lift, fear without reason, heaviness in the air. Perhaps it shows up in disunity, in emotional chaos, in an inability to find rest. The changes are subtle enough to ignore, but real enough to feel. And often, the source remains hidden behind sentiment. It was a gift, it's part of my heritage, or it's just art. We cling to these things because they seem harmless, or because removing them feels extreme. But when peace has been disturbed, when the sanctuary of a home has been compromised, nothing is too small to reconsider. The problem is not just what the object is, but what it represents and whom it honors. Yet, this is not a call to live in fear, nor to become suspicious of every object with foreign origin. Fear is not the answer. Discernment is. The goal is not superstition, but clarity. There is a profound difference between living in paranoia and living with spiritual awareness. You are not a victim in your home, you are its steward. And stewardship means making deliberate choices about what is allowed to stay. Not every foreign object is evil, and not every beautiful item is safe. It requires thought, prayer, and often the courage to let go of things that once held emotional or aesthetic value. But what you gain in exchange is far greater: peace, rest, and the quiet confidence that your space is truly your own. The process of cleansing your home begins with humility, a willingness to ask, what doesn't belong here, and to act on the answers. You may feel a resistance, a reluctance to part with certain things, and that in itself is often revealing. Darkness does not like to be evicted, but when you choose to remove what was once tolerated, you break agreement. You reclaim what was passively surrendered, and though the act may feel small, putting an item in the trash, deleting a file, taking down a poster, it speaks loudly in the unseen realm. It says, "This place is not for you." Light always drives out darkness, but only when it is given room to shine. That room is made when we choose, day by day, to remove what invites the shadows in. There is a subtle, often overlooked truth about the things we surround ourselves with in our homes. They are not simply objects, but vessels of meaning and invitation. The spiritual realm, though invisible, is acutely sensitive to what we welcome into our living spaces. Our homes are not just physical shelters, but spiritual environments shaped by the energies and symbols we allow to remain within them. While we might think evil announces itself through obvious signs, it more often sneaks in quietly, hidden behind beauty, sentiment, or curiosity. It is a silent guest that waits patiently for an invitation. The objects we keep, whether a small statue, a piece of artwork, a book, or even a decorative trinket, can serve as gateways to forces that do not wish us peace. One common misconception is that evil cannot touch us unless we deliberately seek it out or believe in its existence. Yet spiritual laws operate independently of our personal beliefs. Just as the sun's warmth affects us whether or not we acknowledge it, so too do spiritual realities exert influence regardless of our conscious consent. When an item has been crafted, used, or consecrated for purposes tied to the occult, idolatry, or spiritual rebellion, it carries a resonance that calls out to like-minded forces. This connection is often unnoticed by those who keep such items because the influence is subtle and slow, working in the shadows rather than in overt displays. The presence invited by these objects may manifest as a persistent heaviness in a room, unexplained fears, conflict within relationships, or a creeping sense of unrest that cannot be traced to any natural cause. Sentimentality and ignorance are two of the greatest barriers to addressing this issue. Many hold on to certain items because of the memories they carry, gifts from loved ones, souvenirs from travels, or relics from family traditions. These attachments can blind us to the true nature of what is being kept. It is crucial to remember that evil does not respect our emotions or history. It cares not for the stories we tell ourselves about an object, but only for the spiritual claim it might offer. The choice to keep or remove such items is not one of mere aesthetics or nostalgia, but of spiritual stewardship. Every item allowed to remain in the home either contributes to an atmosphere of peace or subtly undermines it. Discernment then becomes our most valuable tool. To cultivate a home of light and rest, we must learn to see beyond surface appearances. This means asking difficult questions about the origins and meanings of the things we possess. Not all foreign or unusual items are harmful, but caution is wise. The process of examination is not about fear or paranoia, but about clarity and responsibility. It requires the courage to let go of things that no longer serve our well-being, and to create space where light can dwell. This is a deeply personal act of reclamation, a declaration that the spiritual atmosphere of our home will not be compromised. The act of removing objects that invite darkness is not merely symbolic. It is a decisive reclaiming of authority over one's space. When a charm is discarded, a dark book burned, or a troubling symbol taken down, these actions speak powerfully in the unseen realm. They are declarations of sovereignty, affirming that the home belongs to its rightful inhabitants, not to intrusive spirits. The spiritual landscape responds to such acts of courage and clarity, often bringing relief and renewed peace where there was unrest. This transformation does not come from superstition or fear, but from wisdom and intentional living. It is a quiet battle, fought not with weapons, but with choices. Choices about what we allow to remain in the spaces where our lives unfold. In choosing what to remove, we choose the kind of home we will inhabit, a sanctuary of peace or a foothold for darkness.